She's going to give a nice talk that she recognises sort of national weight. I tell you what, I'm losing my voice again. Mary, okay, you've done a lot of talks around the world. I can see you've done about 8 of them so far. UK's already been #1 for you. Anyway, I'm going to hand it over to you because I still keep getting these frogs in my throat, okay? So over to you.
Thank you.
Over to you, Mary.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Well, a good afternoon, really, isn't it? But I'll take you into the evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to be invited here by Miles. I've known Miles a number of years, and I think it's extremely courageous of him to set something up like this and provide everyone with such a beautiful range of speakers and information. And this is what has to happen. You know, it's about spreading the word about the reality that all of us know, a part of what we believe is what everyone needs to be aware of now. I'm going to start off with, if you like, what I call the baseline. And I'm going to lead you, hopefully not fairly kindly, down my rabbit hole. And hopefully some of you will find it interesting and also find for yourself that it may make some sense. And I'm hoping that will be the case. So it is a big rabbit hole, and what I want you to be aware of is that for me, as I've gone from being a therapist and counsellor of someone which I believed all ET interaction was initially very traumatic, I discovered that actually it was only a small percentage of people that were traumatized. There are many people, and many people in this audience, I believe, that have actually had a completely different experience with their extraterrestrial encounters. And many of them have been very loving, very warm, and also it's like family. And I'm going to talk a bit about that as well, and particularly the children, because for me the children are coming in, they've not read the books about this, they haven't watched talk shows, they're coming in with an integrity that I believe, and a purity of information, which I think we really do have to start listening to. But I'm also going to show how, thankfully with technology, we are able to see far more of our unseen world. So let's see if I can paint the picture for you, and I hope that you enjoy that picture. And really what I believe is happening on this planet now, and what I'm seeing globally with people contacting me from all walks of life. You know, it's from housewives and farmers to scientists, lawyers, doctors, nurses, a whole range of different professions, and many of them clinical psychologists that know that this isn't, the third dimensional reality is not what our reality really consists of, that we're all actually experiencing things outside the box. And I'm going to look at outside the box now because I know the reason you're all here is because you've experienced perhaps something outside the box, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So having said that, I'm hoping that I can move these slides. Let's try that one, it's not moving. Let's see if we can, there we go. And we've gone back one, let's go back one. So awakening to our cosmic heritage, and I believe that is exactly what's happening right now. We are in a shift from one reality to another, from a third dimensional reality to a multi-dimensional reality. And after all, you know, what I think we really have to honor now is that this is not a new thing. Extraterrestrial interactions are something that have been happening all through our history. And I want to discuss that a little bit more in the sense that I believe we're all hybrids, basically, of perhaps a mix of various so-called gods with the little g, rather than the ones with the big one. This particular skull that you're seeing there, I think is very fascinating because many times archaeologists have said they found these skulls and it was all due to binding of the skull, when in fact they found ultimately fetuses with the same shaped skull. So again, we're not told the truth, you know that, and it's time really to start breaking that and opening it up. One of the most wonderful gentlemen I've met in England who lives in the Lake District is Mike Oram. Some of you may know him. I met Mike many years ago, and he wrote the book, Does It Rain in Other Dimensions? And one of the most fascinating things he told me is what echoes what's happening with the children now. And he said this to his mother at 4 years old, and Mike's now around about my age, he's in his 60s. And listen to what he's saying here. Something of great importance is going to happen on this earth. It will not happen in your lifetime, but in mine. It will affect all units of consciousness, whether they are mineral, vegetable, animal, or man. It is to do with global consciousness. A vast change in consciousness. The energy is headed this way, and the essence of this energy is light. And the energy will repair our DNA. It will make us complete and who we really are. This is what I was trying to tell my mother at 4 years old. Now that's pretty profound, and remember now, he's in his 60s. But let's start at the beginning from science. We all know that science has struggled, for whatever reason, to actually honour the fact that this is real. But I have a beautiful gentleman I'm going to introduce to you. Dr. Rudy Shield of Harvard University. I met Rudy in 2010, spent 4 wonderful days with him, and what was fascinating to me, his openness to all of this. And he actually did a statement for me, which was supposed to go on a documentary I was in, My Mum Talks to Aliens, and I won't go there right now, but it was supposed to go onto that documentary. And this is what he says about the reality. The statement from Mary's research about the nature of the universe and what the UFO phenomenon is now contributing to our overall knowledge of the structure of the universe. We now understand that the speed of thought far exceeds the speed of light, and we live in a quantum universe, in which the quantum effect resides in the dark energy field. The quantum universe supports information transfer from mind to mind through the exchange of quantum holograms, and proceeding at the speed of thought allows what society calls miracles, such as telepathy, past life experiences, remote viewing, crop circles, all the things that science hates to deal with. UFOs in particular get here much faster than the speed of light and allow their alien visitors to interact with us in a variety of ways. And it's been confusing because the craft can be so different and the beings can be so different. It simply suggests there are a great many civilizations out there interacting with us. My colleagues are not really surprised because we understand that basically all stars in our galaxy host a family of planets, much like our own solar system. And what article of religious faith would it take to say life emerged on only our planet when there are billions available? And I think that really says it all. So I'm not going to even go into, is this real or not? I think we all know that's so. Every 6 minutes, someone around the world actually sees a UFO. And it's probably even more than that. But why are they here? We all want to know that, and we know it's not just about lights in the sky, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But I am going to show you a wonderful bit of footage that was shown on that documentary, taken by Megan Hazelwood. She's a nurse in Sydney, and she took this when she was staying in a bed and breakfast, and I actually visited that very place this time while I was in England. And what you're going to see is a little bit of the lights that she filmed, and to the left of these is actually Silbury Hill. And of course you've heard John's wonderful talk this morning. But let me play this for you.
Let me think where that is.
Where?
Karen. Oh look, another one come down.
Oh.
It's up in the sky, look, it. No place or nothing. And another.
Oh my God.
What's that one? Down.
That's been going on for ages.
Oh, and another.
Oh,
You know where that is? Were you took them people yesterday?
No, it's not that far.
No?
I think it's a bit. It
Could
could.
embarrass out happened to mine.
It could be. I mean, if there's a party on, it could be fireworks. It doesn't look like it, does it?
No, they're coming from the sky. Look.
where is that area?
That's how fireworks that.
That's on the left, on the way to Devizes.
Yes, it is. It's Bishop's Callens.
Well, it's go that way.
Oh!
There's another. Oh my God. That's not fireworks, mate.
No, I don't think it is either. Yeah, because look, they're staying lit too long, John.
This has been going on for some time now.
Yeah, but John, that Woodborough, there's a load of them all together, isn't it? Crop circles, there's a lot of them all together. One's about 5 or 6, all in the same field, isn't it?
Could be over that way.
No, that's what I reckon it is too.
I'm introducing you to John and Denise, who run a bed and breakfast at Avebury, just opposite Silbury Hill. Last night, on Tuesday the 17th of July, I arrived here to spend the night, and upon entering my bedroom, I was looking out the bedroom window which overlooks the beautiful Silbury Hill, and I saw the most amazing anomalous lights on the horizon towards the direction of Bishop's Cannings. And John and Denise are going to explain what they saw as well. They came out to the garden as well to have a look.
Yeah, it's about like flashes, isn't it?
Yeah, like 5, one, then another, then another, then another.
Then we stopped and then they started again. Went on for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes like that.
Yeah.
And she filmed one lot and then she changed the film and carried on, still going. She got, it was always sort of finished, didn't it?
Yes, it would have gone on for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting to see it.
Yeah.
See it happen.
What it was, I don't know.
And you've never seen anything like it before? And it's quite amazing how there were cars driving up and down this street at that time of night.
Yeah.
And there were these amazing lights. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, this is the scene in daylight. Silbury Hill. And the lights were seen. The lights were seen right over there where that tree is on the horizon. Just to the right of that tree and behind that tree, that clump of trees on the horizon.
Now, there's been lots of controversy about what they were and whether there was something to do with the military and what have you. But remember, the two locals that were describing what they'd seen had said that they'd never seen anything like that before. And Megan's actually got many other photographs from other parts of the world, and this one's from Colombia, where, it's, as you can see, it looks absolutely identical. And she's got several from other parts of the world. So make of that what you will, but what happened for Megan was this. This is what she said about seeing the UFO, and many of you who have seen UFOs know exactly what she's saying. After I saw the light craft, it changed my life. I felt very emotional for this loving demonstration we're not alone. It was very personal and has profoundly affected my life. I have felt compelled to be of service. This experience has given me so much hope and insights with a real sense of understanding of many things. So for her, it was very, very profound. So let's look at the different triggers that may wake people up, from UFO sightings, encounters, orbs, crop circles, communication with interdimensional, extra-dimensional, transcendental, and perhaps even time travelers, solar and planetary frequencies altering human DNA, downloads of data, holographic scripts and symbols, known as star languages, telepathy and healing. So this all seems to be awakening to, for some people, to aware of their dual consciousness, feeling part human, even part connected to their, what they call their planetary family or the galactic family. And also a feeling that we are changing as a species, some call Homo noeticus. And one young lady says that the children born from 2000 are Homo noeticus, and we are actually going to have even another upgrade she calls Homo novus. So let's see what the evidence is and look at what the experiences themselves say and see if we can qualify that in another way. Tracy Taylor, many of you have heard me mention many times. She's a beautiful young woman now, a mother now. This is interesting. One night I had this intense feeling, she said, before sleep. I wrote in a process where I had little control, something beyond my present understanding. It was contrary to everything I'd ever been taught, and it said that the human race had been created by extraterrestrials. It contained information about genetic manipulation of human and ET DNA to create another species. So what is the evidence of that? Well, we do know we've been visited by gods, the little g, all through our history. Quetzalcoatl is one of them, the feathered serpent in Mexico and South America. And we have evidence that, and people are still seeing the lizard or reptilian beings, and you heard Simon mention his understanding of that, and I'm going to go into that in more detail. But the evidence is there in archaeology, and we know that evidence of other types of beings have been visiting this planet all the way through. In Egypt, of course, you know, one looks at that very interesting headdress that that is supposed here. And what's quite interesting, this actually, this particular image was one I took at Mexico Museum. Again, that strange shaped skull. And look at what this gentleman here, his beautiful gentleman from Ireland, drawn the same type of shaped head of the star beings that he has seen. But let's go to what the children say. You're going to see on the left of your screen here a young woman's drawing of a blue being. She's 9 years old and she calls her Moko. And she's someone who actually helps her understand her non-physical reality. And then, of course, we've got the Indian god Krishna. Note the blue skin. And note another image there that looks suspiciously like a UFO. It's all there in front of you if you're ready to see it. But let's see what the Aborigines draw as well, because obviously that's where I hail from these days in Australia. This beautiful drawing, artist Teddy Chessels, I think says it all, because there we've got the craft. They know about all the different beings. They know about the Wandjina and others. And here you've got someone being taken up into the craft and one of the elders speaking to the greys. And what's also fascinating, this follows through in other countries as well. Many, many people see the mantid being different colours sometimes. This one was drawn by Kasara, a beautiful lady in America, who drew it for a friend of mine who's a scientist, who saw this being standing in front of him for a number of minutes. And he said the strings of light were going under the skin. It was the most amazing thing to see. And what I found out, that in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, the Xhosa call the mantid being the one who teaches, and pointed up to the sky. In the Bushman legends, the mantis was the god who came down from the heavens to share knowledge with mankind. And I've heard from others of the ancientness and the wisdom and master geneticist, which is interesting because he was interacting with a geneticist. And of course, the Aborigine in Australia see them as gods as well and call them the Mamu. And this is what I find really fascinating, is where the links, you see the links all the time. Here's another beautiful picture that I love. I've got a copy of it in my home. And this was given to me by an experiencer in Alice Springs who was very close to the Aborigines, although he was a white Australian. And he was given this because he'd talked about his experiences, and she wanted him to have it, this Aboriginal artist. And what I love about it is not only the wonderful picture that it is, but she's saying this about how she understands these beings. The planets are a half-day's journey. They are very friendly and just watch the Aboriginal way of life. They have no guns, spears or weapons. The air on their planet is food, and the green uniforms protect from Earth diseases. These space people speak all languages. And the elders say the space people showed them how to grow food, find water, and showed them amethyst stones for healing, which was, coincidentally, I had this drawing here. You will see in front of you. That particular drawing was done by Tracy Taylor, and she saw that image in a dream. Now, the fascinating thing was, she said she saw this being holding an amethyst crystal, although she wasn't quite sure why. But of course, that's the Aboriginal Wandjina. The similarities are quite amazing, as you can see here. The ghost messenger from the constellation of Delphinus, who is represented by owls. This particular drawing was done by a lady experienced in Western Australia, saying 1 minute she saw an owl outside the window and then it morphed into a grey. We know about the screen memories. Most of you will know about the screen memories, whether it's Santa Claus, owls, wolves, all sorts of different familiar types of images, which ultimately we suspect are the greys. But what's interesting is that they see the lights and the orbs as spirits of the ancestors. Now, we know that orbs are seen on many cameras now. If it's an expensive camera, you probably won't get so many because it actually filters out a lot of the orbs. So the cheaper the camera, the better, which is interesting. These are two I've taken just outside from my front door. And I found actually they do, I can actually ask for different colours sometimes and they'll present themselves. But what's interesting again, would the Aborigine call these the Min lights and spirits? It's quite possible they do. Now I want to show you another very interesting little connection here, in the sense of many of the fire circles that the Aborigines talk about from the past ancients setting fire to grasslands to find the markings for their ceremonies. They were connected to the space aliens, as they called them, and these were some of the markings. And this one I want you to notice particularly, especially those that are interested in crop circles, because you're going to see some of the links again. Some of you will be aware that on the front of the cover of Contact, Dr. Stephen Greer's book, you've got this wonderful image here. And, you know, obviously they meditated on this particular geometric symbol, and what they found out was a few days later, or it might have been a week, there in the crop circle was the same image. So we are participating, I really believe. But the interesting story is this. This is happened after a fire circle in northern Queensland. And the lady said there were constant UFO sightings in this particular valley. She'd had experiences. And she was told 2 days before by an Aboriginal elder that was something very special and sacred about a part of her land, and the paddock on her land. 2 days later, she and her son saw this strange whirling fire. And they were obviously very panicky, because in Australia you are. But what's interesting about this, as you can see, is this fire behaved really strangely. It literally not only formed this strange symbol, but it burned in these strange lines. And he warned her that something very sacred and special was happening on her land. What the Aborigines were saying about the fire circles. Part of the happenings there was a lot more to this story, but in the morning, one of her friends took a picture in the field very close to it, and she took what she thought was an angel. But very, very interesting. That was the craft the lady had often seen, and you can see here, the night later was a craft. So many ways we're being triggered is my point to this in lots of different instances. Contact can be balls of light. It can be extraterrestrial, interdimensional intelligences, I believe. So let's go into that a little bit more. This is what Tracy says. My contact with non-humans, cosmic beings, occurred before I was born. These beings were my family before I came to the Earth domain, and this close relationship has continued after my birth. And a number of experiences I have now found have memories of pre-birth. What they're saying is they were observing their family and knowing that the woman that's pregnant is going to be their mother, and actually told their parents afterwards what they were observing after they were born. That is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So the awareness is a lot more than we would be aware now in our human form. Orbs are a modern-day phenomena. All of these ones have been taken by me in different places. This was actually on the extraterrestrial highway, coming back actually from Area 51, but that's all another story. I found that quite interesting. That says the extraterrestrial highway. I went to Iseti, James Gilliland, for any of you that are not aware. He has a wonderful ranch in Washington State, and there is Mount Adams here. He has conferences, and in front of you, you're seeing the Field of Dreams. James is the most wonderful gentleman. He's had interactions with many different extraterrestrial and interdimensional beings, including the Sasquatch, a whole range of things. And he's so matter-of-fact about it. It is actually brilliant. But one of the things I wanted to show you again with the orbs, on the Field of Dreams, we were all there, and the first photograph I took with my camera was this one here. In less than a minute, literally with the next click of the camera, Oh, sorry, I've gone too fast. With the click of the camera, it was absolutely filled with all these orbs. And he believes some of them are elementals as well, and I've got no reason to not think that as well. But there are lots of things with the orbs that fascinate me because it's showing us more of a non-physical reality, and many people who are intuitive can see the orbs. I mean, I've got people saying, Mary, I can see an orb flying around you now, or there's one just above your head, or whatever. So they're there, and we know they're there. It's just a matter of showing us more of what we need to see. This is on the move just outside my home in Agnes Water, just again to show you how interesting that can be. And this one particularly demonstrates that when this was a meditation in Tepeslan where Carlos Diaz took the light ships, and I was there with some of my friends from Australia, and we'd just done a meditation, and of course these orbs came in. But this one I actually called in. I said to the gentleman who was with me, a friend, get the camera, I'm going to see if I can call one in. I didn't see it. I kept saying, come on guys, show yourselves. And when I felt it was there, I said, click the camera, and as you can see, it's a metre away from my hand. Try it yourself, it's lots of fun. Another way, this was interesting because Janet Ozabard, the crop circle researcher, you probably, many of you know, from the Netherlands, we're doing crop circle and contact tour, and this was Bunbury in Western Australia, and I was giving a talk, as you can see here, and there's Tracy Taylor on the screen, but what she took was this image just over my laptop, which you can see in the eyes and the face. It is, I think, one of our friends, one of our little visitors. So they're everywhere. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean really anything. So is the human DNA programmer extraterrestrial? The gods with a little g of mythology and religion, are they responsible for DNA upgrades? The Bible, the Christian Bible says, and then God said, and now we take human beings, they will be like us and resemble us. But who is us? So let's take this one step further. Many of you are aware that Francis Crick, who was co-founder of the DNA molecule, author of Life Itself, said this, that an advanced civilization transported the seeds of life in a spaceship. And of course we have the biological mystery, 223 genes, which are a sideways insertion of genetic material, all related to higher psychological functioning. They cannot explain them. They did not come up with the invertebrate phase of our evolution. And I was told by someone who worked with Crick that no other species on this planet actually has these genes. So that's interesting, but it's only the start. Lloyd Pye, some of you will be aware, sadly he passed away recently, but did wonderful work with the Star Child skull, and that in itself is an anomaly that it's well worth you exploring if you're interested in the evidence that we're being visited. But in the intervention theory, I asked Lloyd if I could just capture that snippet from a whistleblower who was a geneticist, because the geneticists know about this. And this geneticist says this: by certain methods of DNA dating, one can tell that numerous genes have been recently added to the human genome. If workers in my field were to say such things openly, we would be ostracized and forced to live in a tent. Any work along these lines would be rejected without any form of appeal. So what can we do? So here again, you can't talk about it, can you? But let's take it one step further. What is it about the genetics, and why is a 13-year-old who's had experiences actually saying this? This is the being he drew after an experience with his brother, being taken up onto a spacecraft and talking about his brother having to get his teddy to go with him, and they didn't have much time. But what he said was, with this drawing, this was not a weapon, but more something to put them, if you like, hypnotize them or put them into trance. Many people mention the being having this object which they felt touched their forehead and would put them into a trance state. But he said this: he felt these beings were like scientists who were curious about us, and he told that it was something to do with genetics. Now, generally 13-year-olds don't speak like that. But let's take it one step further. Is human DNA an extraterrestrial code, a message conveying our true origins? This was published in Icarus in 2013 by 2 scientists in the Republic of Kazakhstan. The genetic code suggests it was invented outside the solar system several billion years ago. It appears there's an intelligent signal embedded in our genetic code, a mathematical and semantic message, a biological SETI. This method would have had greater longevity and a chance of detecting ET than a transient extraterrestrial radio transmission. There are recognizable hallmarks of artificiality, patterns essentially irreducible to any natural origin. Very interesting statement, isn't it? Dr. William Brown, a molecular biologist in Hawaii University, goes a little bit further, and I'll explain that more in a minute. He said there's historical evidence of genetic manipulation which points to extraterrestrial intervention, i.e. the missing link. In DNA molecules fused together, this does not happen naturally. Many signs of genetic manipulation showing advanced technology will have been used to remodel the genomes in the human DNA. And then we get Dr. Roger Leir. Many of you will be familiar with him. He wrote the book, The Aliens and the Scalpel. And Roger was a pioneer because not only did he see implants on X-rays, but actually removed many of them. I think something like 15 or 16 to date before, sadly, he passed away. And what was interesting with my interaction with Dr. Leir was this, because he believed, as I do, that there is something happening with our children. And he gave me some wonderful statistics that I haven't got on here, but I have on my other presentations, which shows certain, in 40 years, he had looked at the developmental stages in children, and he noticed certain developmental stages had incrementally increased as much as 60 to 80%, like the age of walking, talking, etc. And so he came to the conclusion that not only are star children amongst us, but the entire human race is being advanced forward at a rate that is unlikely to be due to slow evolutionary forces. It's far more likely that the rapid advancement of the human species is due to alien intervention in our bodies and minds. And so that's quite an interesting statement to make. So let's look at what Tracy's saying about these new children, because I want to show you maybe some validation or corroboration. She says this: every year these new babies are born and can override dominant conditioning and programming that occurs from birth, superior mental and analytical abilities, and can bypass inferior, unsubstantiated clutter to link directly to the subconscious and superconscious. Conscious awareness of their connection to the universe balanced by spiritual understanding. They have enhanced DNA bodily functions, learning skills, abilities are more advanced. Initially, they do not see things as solid. They have to learn what solid is. Extreme sensitivity to thought, emotion, and physical environment, energy frequencies, and parents' awareness. Photographic memories, fast motor neuron responses, telepathy, manipulation of time and space, non-verbal communication are all conscious abilities with these children. Enhanced DNA, as I say, has 10 times the amount of information, and their molecular structure allows the cells to vibrate faster. Everything is accelerated. Now, the evidence of these changes, one of the things that I came across, as I seem to do synchronously, was medical researchers at the University of California in Los Angeles found that young children exhibit a unique patterning. And they found that in some children there are 24 active codons switched on when normally there's only 20. And they said these children with 24 active codons have shown remarkable resistance to disease with heightened immune systems, and tested for diseases appear to be immune to everything. 1% they believe of children seem to have these extra active codons. Now that is independent of what Tracy was saying. So are they around and can we see them? Are there evidence of them? Here we go. Extra high-functioning psychic children in China. Seen globally, able to open a flower bud with the power of thought, move beans from a sealed bottle with thought, teleportation abilities, objects and people, have the ability to remotely cause changes in the human body of another, such as raised blood pressure, hundreds of miles from the person targeted, film changing DNA in a Petri dish. Really interesting. This was in a book by Thomas Raphael and Paul Dong, China's Super Psychics. And we have this really interesting little anecdote, a Chinese boy you can see in the dark. And this young boy, Nong, was two weeks after Nong was born, his eyes seemed to be very different. He had blue eyes, which emit a blue-green light, just like cat's eyes. They glow and help him see in the dark. He was able to complete a written questionnaire in a pitch-black room. And it seems the scientists are saying for such a thing to occur in humans would require multiple mutations to happen at once. So what is the evidence of that? Dr. William Brown, this is how he describes what he believes is changing. I believe that genetic modification is occurring right now in utero and is actually producing a new human. This is shown by exponential increase in autistic, certain types of autistic, ADD, indigo children. The new genetic architecture allows them to see the world in a multidimensional fashion. I believe research would show dormant genetic regions are being integrated into the biological system, and this is occurring in all of us to produce expanded awareness. Their brains are working faster, they have access to more information, and in the classroom, learning is much faster than normal. I believe they already know what is being taught. The intrinsic understanding of certain knowledge and information goes down to biomolecular level, where the sentient activity of the brain actually takes place in the atomic structure of the DNA molecules. It's transgenerational information. This information is encoded within the atomic structure of the DNA and can be accessed with greater efficiency to produce savant-like characteristics. The modification of the DNA is more the remodeling of the genome to make dormant regions accessible again. The hybrids are altogether a new species of human, and I could go into that as well, but we haven't got time at the moment. Let's go into these letter people, as this particular scientist from Northern Europe, I can't give you her name, because if in her country this was known that she had experiences and was talking about this, it would cause her problems. All you need to know is that she's got a PhD in molecular toxology. She's also got a bachelor in biochemistry and molecular biology diploma. She's a biomedical technician. She's had many UFO encounters, near-death experiences. She's a psychic, etc., etc. These programs such as ADD, ADHD, Asperger's, she calls letter people. I do not believe these are broken genes, but instead offering a new multidimensional skills and to prevent limited reprogramming of a third-dimensional reality. It's not so simple as foreign DNA. It's a combination of genetically improved bodies in combination with souls from different places in our universe, incarnating in these improved bodies. The souls have different frequencies, vibrations, depending on their evolutionary status that plays a role in activation of the DNA in that particular body. I believe you also have to take into account the collective soul of Homo sapiens. Letter people show an impairment in communication between brain halves, thus use one side of the brain for solving the same problem. They say we are dysfunctional. However, it may be a way to free more space in the brain for solving difficult tasks. The Asperger part might be responsible for higher knowledge and not interested in traditional learning. Isn't that an interesting understanding? Letter people have different bodies and nervous systems. We have upgraded nervous systems. In my case, I have more nerve ends for pressure in my skin. I can see more colours and differences between shades of colour. Acute sense of smell and taste and acute hearing, a bit outside normal range. Sensitive to frequencies of all kinds, which means radioactive radiation, energy fields, and energy beaming out from angry people or animals, as well as love and happiness in them. If we can learn how to focus and control our own energy fields, we would be less prone to get ill from our surroundings. We can use our own self-healing abilities. I'm sure many of you can relate to that one way or another. I will make this really quick because I've got so much to cover, but basically she understands ways of dealing with ADHD as a letter person. If you want more information, come to me afterwards. The difference is she's discovered that she's observed calculated levels of acetylcholine and dopamine in the brain are higher in letter people. So she's saying that they need more choline from the vitamin B family because they use more of it. So that's the simplicity behind the cure for letter people. I can go into more detail about that later if I have time. So in other words, there are very simple ways that if you believe you or any of your family have these challenges, that there are some very simple ways to deal with it. But come back to me if you find that interesting to you. What was fascinating to me when I was actually in Hong Kong, I met a lovely researcher called Neil Gold, and what was the clue there? When I met him, he said, Mary, I didn't know I was ADHD. He's in his 50s. He said, but I always knew, I only found out, he said, I was ADHD down the track. He said, as a child, though, I always saw reality differently. And that was the clue. For me, it's okay, so as an ADHD, you're seeing reality differently. What does that mean? And of course, since then, he's wrote Close Encounters of the ADHD kind, which is absolutely fascinating. But all these are clues. You know what I'm talking about. You're forever trying to understand what you're hearing and put it into a context or a framework. And this is how my process worked. But let's take it one step further. So we know that it's quite possible that many of these so-called dysfunctions may very well be new programs. And the reason that they struggle with conventional schooling is because actually they're not meant to be programmed into a dysfunctional and limited third-dimensional reality. And what a great way to do it. Make sure it's hard for them to actually focus and learn in schools. Oh, but let's slow them down, and then we've got them back in the box again. Make your own assumptions around that, or work through that one. Past life connections to extraterrestrials is very common with my work. I've worked with over 2,000 individuals now from all over the globe, and many of them are not even English speaking, so it resonates on some level. This material resonates right across the globe. Tracy says it like this: my contact with non-human cosmic beings has occurred since before I was born. These beings were my family before I came to the Earth domain, and a close relationship with them was continued after my birth. This is the story I'm hearing more times than you would know, and it's from all ages, all belief systems, all cultures, which is fascinating that it resonates. So, are we victims or co-participants in our own evolution? E.T. screen recall, transcending fear. Basically, Tracy says, I misunderstood the Greys. The knowing ET part of me initially made a decision to assist them, and the understanding of this can be overshadowed by fear, which stems from our limited human perceptions and reactions to these experiences. Really interesting, isn't it? This transcending of human fear. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Part of our way of becoming more open to our multidimensional reality. Many non-human forms. The felines or cat beings, very common. Many, many people see them or interact with them or feel connected to them. And as you know, Simon Parkes, who spoke this morning, he also has a very important connection to them. James Gilliland will also say the same to you. In fact, if you look at James, you can see the lion being in his face. It's almost comical. But we have to be careful now about how we interpret what they're about and what have you, because even with the Greys, I was told by one lady that she understood there were at least 165 species of Grey. So it's like taking one human being off this planet and saying they represent the rest of us. It's a nonsense. So we've got to be careful about that. And what I say to people is, trust your own experience as the one that you need to go by, because everyone will perceive them and interact with them differently depending on where they're at in their lives or what they understand. Many different species of star visitors. There are one drawn by a Navy man to the left. The right is one drawn by a young man who said it's a Syrian being, or that it's star being that he sees. Or another grey type being. This particular one, the artist that drew this said he's one that he feels very comfortable with, almost like he'd like a cup of tea. And this one here is a fascinating one. Was drawn with a gentleman who's in his 60s now, but when I did a regression with him, he went straight back to being 7 and got really annoyed with this being because he was taking his sandals off. And when you've got a 60-year-old man talking in a little 7-year-old voice, it really was very hard for me to keep a straight face. But he realized that these were the being that he was interacting with. Some more, the humanoids, Nordics, blue beings, Zeta type, many different types of blue beings. And some people who are very spiritual will say, my guide is a tall blue being or whatever. Again, we've got to get away from the stereotypes, that we have of judging and start to be open to the fact that it's all in the same basket. It's not separate. And that's really important as far as I understand it. Star being drawn by Martin Law in Ireland. What I love about Martin's work is he said he needed to give the colours to the frequency of the star beings, but also you'll see a lot of interesting script, which again is part of the phenomena that I believe very much evidence of a reality of contact, because some of it is quite fascinating and very detailed and very beautiful, although some of it looks like shorthand. And I am getting people from all over the world, small children as well as adults, that have done different types of scripts. And this is fascinating to me, is what is it about, what does it mean? These are beautiful drawings by a young lady in Melbourne. She's in her middle 20s now, and she communicates with many different ambassadors, as she calls them, and her awareness of them and her understanding of them is they're like family. You're going to hear her say a few words shortly, and you'll see for yourself what a delightful young lady this is, and her awareness of where we're going. So the children having contact. What we're seeing is that they have superior mental and analytical capabilities. They have direct connection to higher awareness. They have extreme sensitivity to thought and emotion. They have enhanced DNA. Many of them have photographic memories, fast motor neuron responses, and they can manipulate time and space, and many of them are telepathic. But let's look at how the children talk about this. Some of you may see these images before. This drawing here was done by a 13-year-old, and what's interesting, she's got the egg-shaped grey, but she's also the flat-headed ones as well that she interacts with. So they recognise there are many different forms of beings. This one is drawn with an energy field, she called clowny, the screen memory where children are frightened of clowns often because they're aware that maybe it isn't a clown after all. And this is the craft, the small craft, she says, takes her to the bigger craft, which she even remembers which window she used to look out of. Really interesting detail when children talk of these. But many of them feel they have a dual consciousness, part human, part extraterrestrial. And I'm going to talk about a little 8-year-old boy that lives in Queensland. And this is what he said. I'm on the spacecraft with some of my school friends, and sometimes I see these beings, see the children as human, and sometimes they're alien selves. It's like the other part of them shows themselves. And I've had other stories where somebody's met someone in the street, and one minute they're looking human, and the next minute they see this strange alien aspect to them. And I think this is just showing the genetics. But let's talk about, I'm going to let you hear this young man, talk about his manted family. I draw what I'm seeing, he's saying, when he goes through all these many drawings. His mother saw him drawing many of these complex drawings that were very precious to him from 3 years old. And eventually she discovered that he was having what she had had, many years before, similar experiences. And he says that he can communicate with animals, he sees energy fields, and you're going to hear him talk to me a little bit about his experience.
Since I've been little, I've been drawing what I've been seeing, so that's what's...
So these drawings are what you're actually been seeing?
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes they're things that just pop into my head.
Okay. So where did you see these things, these images?
Sometimes on planets, sometimes on the ships, sometimes when I've been down here and people have just been walking around but they haven't seen them but I've seen them. They've been talking to me through my head when they're not there.
When you say that they're not there, you're saying that you can't sense them around you, but you can get information coming into your head.
Yes.
And what kinds of things would they talk to you about?
About my purpose, about what I should do, about if things around me are good or bad, sometimes if the day's going to be good or bad.
When you say your purpose, what do they tell you about your purpose? Because you have said to me before that you really, you have a way of understanding what animals feel, and you get a sense of that. Could you say a little bit about your purpose and that as well?
Well, I think my purpose is to help animals, to make sure that people don't mistreat animals. Basically, I'm just nature.
Okay. And so is that what they tell you that your purpose is?
Basically, yes.
Okay. So you know that's something that you've come here to do. Is that right?
Yes, the rest is a little bit more complex that I can't really say.
So there are some things that you can't really tell us about.
Because they're too complex.
Because they're too complex, that's fine. And in terms of you knowing about these different shapes and forms of beings, what particular beings do you mostly know that you interact with or you connect with?
The mantis, the lion, and this one.
And what is that one there? This one here. Can you tell us? This one here. Who's this?
It's my uncle. He's angel.
Okay. So when you say your uncle, you're aware that your uncle is an angel.
Yes.
Can you? And this is the face. Is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the angel that you are aware of as your uncle, can they look like you or me?
No.
If there was another form that you've seen, could you describe it? Does it look like anything that we know as one of the creatures on the planet at all in any way? Do they look like that?
No, but they do have the wings, kind of like the wings that I drew when I...
Ah, those wings that you drew, which were the ones you see in pictures of angels? When did you first see the beings that you feel you've got connections to, which was the manta and what was it, the lion being? When did you first start to see those or be aware of those?
Around 3, 4.
Okay. And did you see them when you were awake in the house, or was it a sense that you were seeing them when you were in a dream, a kind of dream state?
Sometimes during the state, sometimes when I'm like around the house.
So you just see them somewhere, but no, somewhere just as you're seeing me right now?
Yes.
It would be like that. And what was your feeling when you saw them? Because were you aware that...
I thought everyone saw them.
So you thought everybody else was seeing them?
Isn't it interesting? Some of it he couldn't tell me because it was too complex, which is really good when you're being told that at 8. But also how he described he thought everybody saw them. And I'm sure some of you in this room really relate to that. Now you've all heard Simon, and I'm sure, like me, you find Simon has a wonderful way of explaining something really quite challenging to many of us in a way that makes absolute sense. And I connected with, interestingly, Simon at the same time I was working with this young boy who said to me that his family were the mantid. And what was fascinating, neither of them communicated. It was only me as the conduit between the two. I would ask Simon something, or I would ask this young boy I call Paul, and I would then say to the other one, can you tell me about X, Y, and Z? And I would find the corroboration. So one of the fascinating things was when they both heard the trilling or chirping sound that the little boy actually made to demonstrate the sound from the mantid, they held him above their head when they were happy with them. Simon actually said the identical thing. Now this is another, and this is going to take it to another level for some of you. On the craft, Simon has said to me that his consciousness was moved into the mantid form, and he would help with humans on board. The human container will be inhabited temporarily by an ET form, such as a mantid or a grey for short periods of time, sometimes transfer into my mantid body for a time, and their soul would be transferred into mine. What did the 8-year-old little boy Paul tell me? Sometimes on the craft, I evaporate into my mantid body. It looks like steam. The mantid makes chirping, trilling sounds, and also another connection where you've got Simon saying, I have mantid, lion, and reptilian connections, but the mantid are my real family. My real family are the mantid, says Paul, an 8-year-old. There's many other correlations. I just want to give you a taste of how two people, completely different generations, are saying so many simple, very unique differences that no one could have possibly known, and yet are identical. So, I think I levitated last night, he said to his parents. I was in a bubble when I travelled. My ancestors say I go back to my planet when I die. The great ancestor is a manta. My brother manta is someone I see on the spaceship. I see him as human, and other times as manta. Ancient Egyptians were not human, but they were cat or lion beings that built the Sphinx. It was to tell humans there are other life forms. Really fascinating. Connections to Egypt, there are many, many people that have connected to Egypt. This particularly I wanted to show you because, again, it was something that Tracy Taylor drew when I first met her in the middle 90s, and she had many of them that joined together. But when she went to Luxor and Karnak, she knew she had to take this one with her, and as you can see, it fitted identically over one of the hieroglyphs. That, for her, was very profound, because what happens is that those that have experiences, as you well know, they're constantly trying to support what they feel they know from that other level. And it's very confronting, because where do you go and how do you get that corroboration? You know, I'm in a position where I get to hear it all, but they don't. But let's look at what Lee says about her when she travels in astral form.
One of the things that's been particularly interesting to me
Yes.
is in terms of the soul.
All right.
And there's been some of the children and some of the adults that are very aware that when they go up on the craft, sometimes they'll inhabit a non-human form while they're on the craft.
Okay.
That one little boy mentioned he evaporated into the mantis form,
Yes.
for example.
Yes.
Is this something you've experienced, to go into another container for a while?
Yeah. My astral body is not human. It's an ozoni. It's something to do with it's a kind of like a life favoritism in a way. Like your soul remembers this and it wants to duplicate it and just wants to keep it there. It's something that I've chosen as well, but something that like this is right. This is what's supposed to be. And every time I travel, I'm always in my ozoni. Like I look ozoni. I'm purplish skin. You know.
Have you got the picture of the
Yes,
ozoni?
I do. I'll show you also a colored image as well. I can find it. An example of how they look like.
Ah, yes.
Really interesting, and there's a lot more that I'll see if I can play this next bit, because I would really like you to hear more of what she's talking about, because it will give you a real sense of the kinds of stories and accounts that I hear that really are quite incredibly amazing and very convincing.
I'm Leah Capitelli. I'm 19 years old, and I live in Victoria, Australia. Well, I was about 5-6 years old when I started to get my memories from my past life. They came quite slowly, but I could feel them, like, you know, I could get certain feelings, certain memories, and I remember telling Mum about it. You know, but the thing is, long before that, I used to see ETs and amongst other things as well, like energy, you know, auras here and there. By the time I was 7-8 years old, I had a really clear understanding of what is going on and how many just trying to how many things are actually going on right now, and it made me really confused, because like how many people don't know as well. So things, and around about 8 years old, I realized, yeah, there's something going on.
That you were different in
Yes.
some way, because you did mention to me that you're aware of healing in your hands. What
Right.
age were you when you noticed that?
I was about, I'd say about 8 years old. I was about
Okay.
8.
Yeah. And when you see energy fields, do energy fields, when you see them, how do they appear to you? How do you perceive them?
They sometimes go in colors, lights as well. Like it's not like the harmful effects of like brightness of light. You know how too much brightness hurts the eyes. It's more like it can be really bright, but it doesn't hurt. And it's usually like, how do I explain it? It's just all these different sort of things. Like, it could be in shapes, you know, or formless, and it can be, you know, entities themselves. And it could easily, for me, I could easily was going to university at that time, and she would get headaches. I remember getting headaches, and, you know, sometimes she would be sore in certain places, and I would just put my hands on her in that place, and it would go away. And she, like, after a few seconds or maybe a couple minutes, she would just say, like, oh, it's gone now. And I'm like, well, to me, it came perfectly normal. Like, it was totally natural for me. And, you know, I could do it. But then around that time, I could realize realized there was something, going on with me that other people couldn't do. I knew my mom couldn't do the same things that I could, and I was like, okay, there's something which is just an object comparing to an entity. And I just, I slowly from that, slowly I started to understand and learn what is what very, very early on. And I remember around that same time I was getting my connection with the ETs as well. And they would teach me, this is what this means. This is, when you see this energy, this is a vortex, or this is you see this round entity, it's just a soul, or you see this sort of shape, it's just another entity. They would tell me all
So
these
they
things.
would teach you
Yes.
what you were perceiving?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And which ones were those that helped you understand what you were seeing from that level?
It would be the energy beings that were teaching me most of all, because I already had a prior connection with one of them, because I was close with one of them in a previous life, and I was and only once I actually ever saw an energy being outside their suit. It was because after that time I learned what to see. When I see energy, I could see, I could understand what was happening, and when he revealed himself to me, I could see light around him, and I could see a very, very faint shape of how he would have looked like if he still had a solid body. And I could just, because of my knowledge, my learning, I could, I know what I'm looking at. And I wasn't scared at all. There was no fear. If anything, I was more comfortable with that than anything I've experienced on it. I can tell you that right now.
So that was actually more comfortable and natural to you than being a human?
Oh, yeah, by far.
How did you perceive them?
Well, when I was fairly young, they showed me in a humanoid, a human appearance.
Yes.
But then, as soon as when I would gradually get older, a bit more mature, they started to show how they really looked like. But the thing is, they were in their they were still not showing their true energy form. They were still sort of contained in a way.
So they were careful about what they showed you to begin.
Very interesting, isn't it? How she has been quite aware of her interactions, almost from the word go, and that anything she didn't understand in her in her multidimensional experiences were explained to her by her non-physical sources, if you like. And this is what I'm hearing all the time. And I'm hopefully going to have a bit of time to tell you about what I call the school, the ET school, that little Paul also talks about, where he learns things to use his brain waves, as he says, with other children from school, but also other children, he said, that looked human but had bigger eyes, so they were not human. But I'm very aware of the time, so I'm going to have to really whiz through. I'm only going to briefly say this. This particular picture I have, two people, one, Paul, who's 8, an adult experiencer, both called it a gate into other universes, which is really interesting that I got this reaction about this particular picture. Again, it's one corroborating another. They haven't met, they've never spoken. Another interesting fact was young children, one 4-year-old, one 15-year-old boy told me that they were aware that when the beings touched them, their skin felt like dolphin skin. Now, how they know about dolphin skin is really an interesting question in itself. But again, looking for corroboration, I found a very interesting comment in this book by Dr. Michael Wolff. Some of you will know that he worked in Area 51, Dulce, S4. He wrote this book, The Catchers of Heaven, about his interactions with different kinds of beings. One of them was Coulter, who is on the cover there, and he reveals a great deal in the book. But interesting, these are his comments about the Greys. The Greys have personalities and a sense of humour. Their smooth, soft skin felt like dolphin skin to touch. They share the same evolutionary path as dolphins. And I have not met a Grey I didn't like, which is really interesting. ET communication, telepathic downloads, complex geometric art, crop circles, scripts, star languages. What does it all mean? One of the things that Tracy says is it should be borne in mind that the nature of extraterrestrial communications, in a majority of instances, SAR visitors communicate with humans by telepathic transfer of mental images and concepts rather than by words and speech. Everything is made up of the same matter, resonating at different harmonics. So the ETs are able to communicate with us, directing thought on subatomic levels, and so activate the subconscious. These symbols are meant to communicate the nature of the macrocosm, which is really fascinating. So let's look at why so many are drawing these different symbols and marks. These particular scripts are interesting. One of them, a lady sent me this markings that her 5-year-old wrote on her arm and said, "It's to help you understand, Mum." And really, really interesting. Why would she do this on her arm? Interestingly, in my own, where I live, a gentleman told me that his son and a friend at 4 years old started to write symbols on their arm. Really, really interesting. Why would they do that? This is from a script of a gentleman who's now no longer 3, but as you can see, it's quite a complex script to be writing at 3 years old. And this is what he told me about his earlier years. 3 times a week I'd be woken by a glow, a woman with long hair, green eyes, and there was no beam me up Scotty. We would be in a room, walls were metallic when touched, would ripple like water, a window like a plasma screen would show stars, nebula, and symbols. When put in correct order would show me things. Very, very interesting. Here is some more of those symbols that he put on his arm, and when I asked him why, he said I wanted other people like myself to recognize me so we could connect. Many feel very isolated and very alone, and understandably are very reluctant to share this with anybody else. And as you can see, there are some highlighted there. He said when certain things happen on the planet, certain of those symbols seem to irritate him, almost highlighting that they represent something. I'm not going to let you hear the young lady say this because there's not time, but I've got a 7-year-old young girl who had, her mother had my book, and in it is a script by Tracy Taylor. The mother was reading it, the little girl saw the script, and she said, "I can read that." And the mother said, "Can you?" Okay, she read it in the language and then translated it. When I found out about this, I asked her to do it over Skype, and this little bright 7-year-old said, "Oh, yes, I can." I said, "Can you do it in the language as well as English?" She said, "I can do both." She spoke in the language, she translated it into English, and I said to her, "So what's the source of that information?" She said, "Oh, that one's the Greys." 7 years old. I have other evidence of similar things, but that's just one. So the script seems to be part of the learning that may very well be on the craft. This is an 11-year-old and his script. I've got many, many pages of script. Here's another beautiful one here from Martin Laura in Ireland, and he said that he knows whenever he doesn't do it correctly, but he hasn't got a clue what it means. "I'm rather astonished of what I've done. The characters are consistent, flawless, but to my sense is written in the bold confidence and authenticity of a piece of Zen calligraphy. To be honest, I haven't a clue what I've written, but I do know when I write only one character wrong, I throw it on the fire and start again." Fascinating. Many different kinds of script, not doodles. Believe me, these are not doodles. Okay, so the artwork, and I'm going to cover this quickly. This wonderful artist has downloaded over the period of, I think it was 10 years, a whole working process of what she said was information. Biology, neurology, physics, astronomy, astrophysics, theology, philosophy, spirituality, technology, anthropology, and archaeology. I felt by downloading these images they were coming from higher intelligences and teaching me, and awakened me to a higher consciousness. I learned to see life differently. The art progressed in groups at a time, telling me something I was not aware until the next body of artwork was completed. It took me 10 years before I realized specific information was being relayed to me through this art-making process. And these are some of the images. These are some of the beings that she is communicating with. Very interesting, fascinating images. But I came across people that actually could understand on some level what this was all about. This particular lady is a wonderful artist in Western Australia, and Lorraine has had many interactions. You can see here there's Uluru, and quite an interesting anomalous light there where she had some interactions. But when I showed her pictures, because she was an artist, somehow or other she seemed to shift into a new gear when she saw them. And so when I showed things like this to her, this is what she was saying. There are two eyes looking at me. This is affecting my body. There's another download. We are mirror images of they, the matrix. We don't need to understand. It's interstellar, it's galactic. When people look at this, they will be open to possibilities. Some now being born have a direct link to that bright light, a thread to all the new ones, which came through simply by her looking at those images. Here's another one. It's amazing. I'm going somewhere. It's a portal, an entrance. It's like I'm not here, but can be between both places at the same time, like the ability to go there and be with them. Leonardo da Vinci created the same portal. They're working through me, through the pictures, the matrix. It's downloading to people's subconscious. They're full of compassion. It's just like us, we are they. What fascinating way of tuning in to these pictures. Terry Mace is a psychotherapist in the UK who I was showing some of these images to a few years ago at another conference. He was completely traumatized when he looked at them. In fact, he felt like he was downloading them instantly. When I saw Tracy's art to begin with, I was traumatized. I felt sick and felt almost like I had a nervous breakdown. It knocked me off my feet, metaphysically, spiritually, an internal implosion like a light going on. Switches pulled, flashbacks, experiences I sensed and understood, something I shouldn't have had knowledge of, as awakening spiritually. Since being a child, I had forgotten, and something I'd been trained to do. I was able to sense and switch on a channel and use my hand as a barcode reader, scanning with the third eye to receive the equivalent of several hundred terabytes, and uploaded them and uplinked that knocked me backwards. I felt like I'd been hit by a lightning strike. Information and data at light speed, and continues, I understood on multiple levels what it meant, what its potential was for humanity. Group consciousness, interpreting codes, ciphers, signs, forms, geometric formula, blueprints, designs, models, encryptions, meta-languages, hieroglyphics, schematics, an internal Rosetta Stone was turned on, an intergalactic process. I could understand on a conscious and superconscious level, something I had been trained to do. I was a code breaker, able to interpret encrypted codes received and downloaded. I don't know where it comes from, but it was activated by the artwork. I'm able to understand and do something with it. Now it's 5 to 5. I'm going to stop to give you 10 minutes, and I'm going to take you further down the rabbit hole. So hang on to that thought.
Jerry. We'll have a break for 10 minutes. The staff is still waiting.